In fact, it is about a song about his gal, but it was all made up of cigarettes commercials. So complete from front to back, she's my pal. She's toasted by the sun, and I'm a son of a gun. If she don't make my 5 o'clock shadow come around at 1, oh, you can bet your boots I'd walk a mile through the snow just to see her true thrush smile they mention on the radio. If you don't think she's a lot of fun, you just ask the guy that owns one. So round, so firm, so fully packed. That's my gal.
Must have played that commercial a lot.
We used to come back from Brower Park or Ojibwa, and I'd start singing those things like that. And Perry said, "Where in the world did you ever learn something like that?" I said, "Well, that's all we had to do when we were kids."
Yeah.
Make our own entertainment.
Yeah. One second. See to balance the camera's color.
I hope that's a very durable camera.
Not sure if it can take you.
Otherwise, taking my picture, it'll break it. Nothing flat. Well, the red light is on.
Yep.
That means we're making film, or cutting film, or not processing film.
You do that still, though. I've done that in school. Yeah. So, what do you want to start with?
Well, where do you want to go?
You want to start with your childhood, or?
I want to take a train ride, or go to an army camp, or...
Let's start with a train ride, I guess.
So what?
Where does a train ride take place?
That was from one army camp to another. Troop trains. Well, I can start out with when I was enlisted or something.
Okay, yeah, how you got into,
Yeah,
how you
so
ended up there.
yeah, I got through high school at a young age, but I was still a year younger than everybody else, because if you had read that thing, you'd see that for convenience reasons, my dad sent me to school a year early. I was tagging along, and it was a rural school, and the teacher said, "Well, he's here practically every day. Why don't you enroll him?" So she enrolled me, or my dad had me to enroll. And that means that I got out of high school when I was 16, and I was 17 in the fall. And so I was a year behind everyone else all the time, and everything as far as classes and school, and all the other guys had gone into service. And I was 17, and I'd have to wait until October, that fall would be 18 to get in. And so I pleaded with my dad and said, "Hey, if I go in and enlist now, I get a choice of what I can have." And he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I thought maybe I'd like to go in the Air Force." Only it was the Army Air Force then. You had the services were broken up into, they had a Navy Air Force, the Army Air Force. The Marines had their own complement of Air Force too. So I think it was 1947 they decided to just an Air Force. Anyhow, my dad signed the slip of paper. In fact, I was looking through some of my stuff, and I saw it the other day, permission to enlist at 17. And So I enlisted in the Air Corps, Army Air Corps, and after I turned 18 in October, uh, they inducted me in November, probably 10th, 12th, 13th, right along in there. It wasn't long after my 18th birthday, anyhow. So then the first thing was basic training. I was inducted into the Army Air Force in Fort Sheridan, Illinois. That's a little bit north of Chicago at that time. Now it's all inclusive into the Chicago, within the city limits, but Great Lakes was up that area. The Navy Induction Center and Army Induction Center, Fort Sheridan. So they did a little indoctrination then, just let you know what the chow tastes like, and gave us the clothes, which is a kind of, or uniforms, which is kind of a laugh. They give you a pair of shoes that's too big, and you complain that you'll grow into them, and that was always the story that they give you. So with all of our new clothes, we went down to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. That was the first troop ride on a troop train. And that was, now I was talking to Ed about that the other day, or someone, and they said, well, that was way out south of St. Louis. I said, listen, we used to get on a streetcar and it was downtown and nothing flat, so it couldn't have been too far. I know it was one of the fellows I was talking to at the VFW. We were down there for a meal the other night. And his wife came from St. Louis. And she corrected him on it. She said it was close to town. So, south side, and that's where we took our basic. Of course, the basic is just that, basic. They teach you the primary things of the service, how to protect yourself, and what weaponry you'll use, what armament you probably use, and then lots of exercise. You know through there that whether you're going to make it or not. But besides that, they gave us an awful lot of tests, psychomotor tests, they call it, a combination of psycho, I guess, and your motor action is whether you're very coordinated or not. But I went in wanting to be a pilot, and the first thing I found out, I wasn't coordinated enough to be a pilot. So, and they had all kinds of tests there for that too. And so the term is washed out. Then what are we going to do with this guy? They couldn't transfer me out to the infantry. At that time, they would draft guys in too, sometimes to the Air Force and sometimes to the Navy. But if you were drafted and they found out they didn't have a place for you there, they could transfer you into something else. And that happened a lot when I was in school, through the schools that I went to. And these guys that were drafted into the Air Force, they ended up going in D-Day over in France, Normandy beachhead and whatnot. They were yanking them out of the class right and left. If you didn't pass your, we call it a sweat box. Every week, at the end of the week, you had an exam, and you better know what you, well, in fact, they had one at the end of every day too. Then they had one at the end of every week. And you had to pass them all in order to stay there. So it was either that way or the highway, and the highway took you overseas right away into the infantry. And the thing about Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, was it was an old army camp. They had a lot of permanent buildings around there for permanent party. It's the colonels and the, I don't know if they had any generals down there or not, but the higher ranking ones had their, they were billeted, you say, on the premises. So every Saturday they had a parade, and that would take you out to the parade grounds. They had a big parade grounds there, and it got pretty warm as it got to summer because they'd dress us up in their olive drabs, which are wool. A couple times we went out in suntans, which are khaki. But then you had to carry your piece with your rifle, what you call the piece then. And it was rather, it was different, except that I never wanted to go to parades after that for some reason or other. The Jefferson Barracks was an ideal place for training because they had all these sinkholes around there, and whereas the lime rock would cave out underneath and you'd end up with a pit like. And so of course they'd run us around there and up and down, up and down. And then come time to go to the firing range. That was a 20-mile hike. And so we were to pack up our stuff and leave it on our bunk from the one area and head out for the firing range. Well, we walked that 20 miles down there and stayed there one night, 2 nights, and fired the next, and we walked back the third. It was a place they call Moss Hollow, and that's all they did there was a firing range. But to find out whether you're going to make it or not, the way they did when you got back to the camp was all your stuff was where you had been. It was out in the company street. And I mean, you had it up in the duffel bags and your other bags that you carried the stuff in. And we went there and they said, "Where's your stuff?" They said, "It's over by Tent City." "Where's that?" "Well, that's 2 miles over there." So after we got back, that 20-mile hike from the rifle range, we went down to Tent City, and everybody was assigned to a tent, 5-man tents. And then they said, "Well, you got to go pick up your bedding," which amounted to a couple sheets, a mattress cover, and a couple blankets, and a pillow. And so that was another 2-hour wait. And it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, you finally got to hit the hay. And it was maybe a half hour, you're back up again. Because reveille sounded at 5:30, or maybe it was 6 o'clock. But then it was up, and then we went to chow. Then they started a new day again, but a lot of guys caved in. They just couldn't take that, rapid session of endurance. But things settled down pretty good after that, and we had more tests. And the one test that they wanted to find out of what you would be good at was took quite a while. And they came up with an assignment for you after that. And mine was radio and pre-radar. Radio I could understand. I knew how to turn one on and off. It's about the only thing. Radar, I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. So the school was at Truex Field, Madison, Wisconsin. And then after you got your assignment, and mine was to Truex Field, they started making arrangements with cutting the shipping orders. So then one day they said everybody that's going to radio and pre-radar school fall out. We fell out and took us down to the depot and got us on another troop train, and we were on our way to Wisconsin. And I'll tell you, Madison, Truex Field was an airfield just outside of Madison, which is, of course, the state capital of Wisconsin, and it was cold that time of the year. And it was strictly radio school. And we learned the basics of radio, and thrown in all that stuff was aircraft recognition, and they'd flash a silhouette of an airplane on the wall for a hundredth of a second, and they'd give you a test. After you'd studied what the plane looked like from different angles, they'd flash it on there, and then you'd write down what it was, and so you had to get them pretty close, of course. Not seeing them actually, but kids back in those days, a lot of them would voluntarily make model airplanes and whittle them out of wood, balsam wood, lightweight, and that's what they would use in the service for aircraft recognition. So the tolerances had to be pretty close. Flip one up there, the silhouette, for a hundredth of a second, why, it was gone before it was up there almost. But anyway, that's the way we had our aircraft recognition. And then I have a deck of cards in the other room that has all the airplanes on that. And when you played cards, they would see that you got a deck of cards with those, so that you would, as a shuffle, you'd be shuffling a P-38, a P-51, a P-47, a B-24, bomber, and most anything. So they had those with you quite a bit. You were surrounded with it, and that was a part of your training too, that you were supposed to be familiarized with it continuously. So when we got through with our radio school, it was interesting. I got a few high frequency burns up there messing around, and it seems like if you get a high frequency burn on the radio, it burns from the bone out. You'd get a little bitty white spot here on your finger where it contacted it, and then it would seem that it would get whiter and bigger as it went in towards the bone. An interesting thing that what we did up there, we had this, they called it the 299 command radio transmitter and receiver, and they were mounted on a trailer that you could be towed around by a jeep. Now that's what they used over in the mountains in Italy for calling the Navy to bombard, to back them up, for firepower when they were in the mountains. The guy sitting up there in infantry could call back to the ship and say, send me so many rounds in a certain vector, and then zero in on the enemy and pretty well knock them out. But we could hear that over in Madison, Wisconsin in the evening, certain time of the day when the ionosphere lowers. The radio waves would bounce from the earth to the ionosphere. That's the way they travel. So at night, the ionosphere came out. That's why on the radio, at home, a home radio, you get so much better reception at night. That was on the audio AM radio, which is audio modulation. But then we came out with a FM, frequency modulation. It didn't work that way. But these things were all AM, AM, lower frequency. And we could hear these guys calling the shells, and saying, you're right on, pop a couple more in there from Madison. But when we got done there, oh, by the way, that's the first place I ever saw a WAC. WAC was a Women's Auxiliary Corps. They had women in the service. First, they were just working in offices and whatnot, but later on they put them out, and they would march the guys to school. We had a lady that would march us to school in the morning, march us back at night, but that relieved some other guy that could go and do some work somewhere, maybe transfer to the infantry. But Then time came for us to leave there, and the ones that graduated, of course, went to electronic school in Chanute, Illinois. That's at Rantoul. Anytime we go down to Illinois, we go right past the place. And there's another big airfield there. And it was coming on spring, pretty nice weather, a whole lot better. But it was another ride on a troop train. And we were there probably 3 or 4 months. I had a good buddy that was down there. We used to go to town together and chum around. His name was Joe Ament, Ament. And then when he got ready to leave, he said, well, I won't be seeing you again. I says, why? We're supposed to be leaving for Boca Raton, Florida. He says, I can't go. I said, well, why not? He said, they won't take anyone that has a felony. I said, I've been hanging around with a jailbird all this time and you didn't tell me? He said, yeah, I got in a little trouble a few years back, and it's on my record, and they said they won't let you study classified material or secret material if you have a record. So Joe stayed here, and I went on down to Boca Raton, Florida. Long troop train ride. And the temperature was altogether different, of course. We were there, we got chased out of our camp at Boca Raton 2 different times because of hurricanes that summer. I don't remember the wind speed or anything, but the camp was damaged, tree limbs and stuff down when we got back. But they took us into the big country club at Boca Raton. It was a highfalutin place. The Gotbucks people hung out there, plus us. Of course, I think it was 10,000 guys that got into that place, which meant that if you had a room, you were sitting around the wall side by side, and somebody was bringing you sea rations. You didn't need the dining room. But an interesting thing was that Duke Ellington, he was you probably remember hearing him. He was an orchestra leader and quite an entertainment. He happened to be there at that time. And so he put on some shows, which you didn't get to, but they piped the music into the room so we could sit in the room and listen to the Duke play. So that was kind of interesting. They sent us back to our camp after it was over with, after the 2 hurricanes. I was always going to go down to the Tribune and look up in their archives and see how much that amounted to at the time, see what the wind speed was, but that's another thing that I didn't get around to doing. I did go down there and look up the typhoon we had in Okinawa. I looked that one up and got some information on it one time. So come time to get over to get out of Boca Raton, that's where we lost a lot of guys. The sweat boxes kept on getting worse. I mean harder, more difficult. And this place was very secret. In fact, the only reason they make us corporal down there is because we had to be a non-commissioned officer to study secret material. So a corporal was the lowest grade of non-commissioned officer there was. And they always told us, if anybody, while you're in town, starts asking you questions, what you do, especially asking about radar, report them. Get back here and let us know. Because this was a good thing, and it was relatively new. We were the first ones to go to the Pacific with it. And it was there we got familiarized with the unit and set the units up and started running planes or operating planes with them. At first, we just sit out there and monitor the system and listen to the over the channels to see what the spiel was, how they talked back and forth, the procedure of calling on and landing and that stuff. But there, we did a whole lot of physical education. I mean, PE. I mean, they pushed us pretty hard on that. I remember one time that they had these stands in a big square area, like a large city block. And each corner they'd have a stand, the guy would be up on top of it, the instructor. And he'd call everybody to attention, and of course, when they call you attention, you lined up directly on the guy in front of you, sideways in front. So this one time, this guy standing ahead of me was way out of line. I was on like a sore thumb standing back there, see. So I jumped over to get behind him to keep getting balled out, and that instructor, I can remember his name, Lieutenant Batista. That's the same name as the, I moved. The same name as the guy from the Prime Minister of Cuba at the time, Batista. But he was, they said that he played pro football in the backfield, a runner. But he was built, was he built? He bounced down off of that instruction or that training stand and is down there in front of me and about that quick. What are you doing, soldier? Trying to fall in line. You were at attention, you weren't to move. He says, start running. So I spent the rest of that day running around that like a large city block while these other guys were doing their what do we call that? Air Corps hops or side straddle hop, or anyhow, it was an exercise that we always did. And so come time to go back, and every once in a while he'd turn to my way and yell, a little faster, And so I'd pick it up a notch. And of course, then finally it was time. It was supposed to do this for an hour, physical ed, and then go and get your showers. And so the fell out into the street there, but not me. He wouldn't let me back in formation. He said, you stay out here by me and jog with me. So he'd run up to the front and run to the back, run to the front, run to the back, give him a little extra, but he was having to run too. So when we got back to the gym, that was where he had his office, in the gym. He says, he dismissed the rest of the guys and said real loud, sir, you come in here with me. So these other guys thought, oh, he's going to catch you now. So we went in there, and the first thing he did was, your name is Baker, yeah, Corporal Baker. He says, I want to thank you for playing along with it. He says, I know exactly what happened to you when you couldn't cover down on that guy in front of you. He said, but ever so often, I've got to get somebody out of the gang to show these guys, keep them on their toes. And he says, you happen to be it today. So he said, I want to tell you I appreciate you going along with it. See you later. And I thought, and of course when I got back to my barracks, what did he do to you? How many days you got to stay in camp, How many days KP, this and that and the other. I said, he lectured me pretty good. That was enough. So the other experience I had down there was you're supposed to shave every day when you got up. I didn't have anything to shave. So I'd shave maybe once a week. And we fell out that one morning for inspection, and the guy come down through there, "Did you shave this morning?" Well, I couldn't lie to him. I said, "No, sir." "Take his name." So my name went down in a little black book. Afterwards, these guys won't get a pass this weekend. They'll be over and doing close order drill Saturday, a certain time when the other guys are going to town. So that day, oh, there's quite a few of us. We were out there, and my GI shoes, I did so much twisting and turning that I wore a sole off the bottom of my GI shoes that I went anyway. I got a new pair of shoes out of it. But then came the day that we were to get to leave there, and they gave us what they call, instead of a furlough, a delay en route. We're supposed to go to Fort Dix, New Jersey, up your way, where you live now. And I could have 12 days, it would amount to, on my own, so I'd spend some time in southern Illinois, where I went into the service from, to my dad's down there. So we got on the train, they called it the City of Miami. It ran only between Miami and Chicago. Beautiful train. I mean, it was top notch in those days. And well, the difference is you'd be sitting there wondering when you're going to leave and look out the window and you're on your way. It was so smooth, the hydraulics was so smooth. You didn't know it was starting out, because those troop trains are always jerking you around. So I got off in southern Illinois for the first part of my delay en route. But previous to that, I'll tell you, it was cold. This was shortly before Christmas. And the only thing we had, they didn't put stoves in those barracks, you call them barracks, that they were built out of some kind of sheeting, very cheap stuff. And they had black tar paper on the outside, just to get by. And what you had for night was 2 GI blankets and your sheets, and that was it. And you shared those GI blankets with sand fleas, I think, or something was in there that bit. Another thing that to keep us occupied when we weren't, after we had got through with our classes, was they'd get us out to cut underbrush. Had all the tools and everything. I remember this one kid, this one day it was hot, and he took his fatigue jacket off and threw it down on the ground. Normally you'd hang it up somewhere on a twig on a tree. Well, come time to go in at noon, he picked up that fatigue jacket and threw it around his body. And all of a sudden he said, "Ouch." He had picked up a scorpion, and it was right in the middle, hit him right in the middle of the back. And it was close enough to his heart that he went blind for a day or so. So he got to the hospital and a couple good days rest. But it never had any ill effect on him. But what happened is I carried one in my field jacket up to southern Illinois. And I got up there and I was going to go downtown, and I shoved my arm down my field jacket, and something got me on my little finger. And of course my sister, Alice, she got all shook up. What was it? What was it? I don't know. Something down there. I turned the sleeve inside out. And there was a little scorpion. His body is about the size of my thumbnail. A little tail sticking up there. And his stinger, they wanted each side of the tail, whip that thing back and forth. But my hand started swelling up, and it swelled from here. Got pretty good size. She said, "Oh, you got to go down the doctor and get something to. No, I don't. I told her that our experience down there was if it was in an extremity, it didn't amount to much, just a lot of pain. But if it was close to your heart, then you had a problem. You'd have to get something to neutralize it. So I always said I brought a scorpion home with me on furlough. Let him know what Southern Illinois was like. Then after so many days down there, why, we got back. I caught at Carbondale. I caught the city of Miami coming through there on into Chicago. And then in Chicago, we transferred over to the Pennsylvania Railroad that took us into Fort Dix. And how much more you got on there?
This guy.
20 minutes.
Quite a bit.
On that tape.
So that we went into Fort Dix. Big military installations spread out over a large area. But there was a little nightlife around there. The guys, when they got a weekend pass or a 3-day pass, they'd always head into New York City. But it was a lot of fun in Trenton too, and Newark, New Jersey, was places that they bypassed. And I found out if you went into Newark or to Trenton, there weren't many GIs around. They'd all gone straight on into the big city, where there's a lot of things doing that I was interested in anyway. So that's where I had my first pizza in Trenton. We didn't call it pizza then. It was tomato pie. Very good. Good, hard, thin crust, just like a pie crust with a tomato sauce over it. And then they would bake it. I don't recall having a lot of pepperoni or sausage or anything like that on it, peppers. But it was just a baked on tomato sauce that was tasty. But there too, you had a lot of USOs in that area. And I recall, hey, the girls would come from all over, to dance. They all liked it. I didn't dance much, but I liked to sit and talk. So then we went into Camden a couple of times while we were there. This was a nightlife. And I seen on the stage Ann Sutherland. She's been gone for quite some time now. But she was a nice-looking lady actress. And this was at a place where they had, first time I've ever seen it, their beer was in pitchers. They'd serve it to the GIs. Maybe all you do is go up and buy a glass, or get a glass. I forget just how they handled it. Then they'd keep on bringing you. You ordered pitchers. And so it was a matter of sharing. Well, we shared everything anyway, so one guy wasn't going to overdo it over another guy. But this other guy that, I can't remember his name now, he was a kind of a comedian, and he sang. One of his songs, That's What I Like About the South. It was well known at the time. He was there. Then I seen Tony Bennett. He was there one time. The guy that left his heart in San Francisco. He's pretty old. And then we went into New York a few times. We'd stay at the YMCA, which was maybe $1.25 a night. And I remember being down in Times Square watching the news go by. They had that thing that, well, they're common now, the string of lights, and the words go sailing along the 5th and Broadway there. And then Radio City Music Hall, I was there a couple different times. I forget what I saw there. I never did go out to the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island, but I've ridden the ferries across through there. I don't know which one. That's a long time ago. But eventually, we went out to Long Island. We were transferred out there for a couple of weeks. But previous to that, we set a radar unit up and kind of used a railroad track for a runway, just to simulate a runway. And then it was out in the boonies, nobody around, it's hard to get to, wintertime, but we had heat. And we would call a plane up and we'd direct him around to line him up with that railroad track, which was supposed to be the runway. Then he'd tell us if we were close or whether we were far off or anything like that. And he'd do this all day long, keep on running us until our radar officer would say it's all done for, but we'd go out there and I don't remember the type of, we didn't see tents. I don't remember if they had temporary barracks there or what, but it was just for that special reason. Now, these radar units were new. They were trying to coordinate them so that we'd be overseas at the time that the Black Widow night fighters would be there. Because the Army has a way of messing everything up, but I think that was one way one thing that they got right, the timing of it. Because we were trained and were sent overseas about the time that they were starting to produce those Black Widow night fighters. And they used them in the Philippines. They used them on Okinawa and Iwo where I was. And they used them in Iwo Jima, where there's a movie out right now about Flags of Our Fathers. I read that book, by the way. So at that time, that's when we were getting close enough to Japan that they were sending a lot of planes down to provoke us and they did an awful lot of damage to our Navy at Okinawa. That was something that if one of those suicide planes could set an aircraft carrier or a battle wagon on fire, hey, that was big stuff for them. And so that was our main target then. Anyhow, we had to have some other practical training, and they sent us up to LaGuardia Field, Long Island. Now that was near a town of Hempstead, and they gave us rooms in a motel in Hempstead. And it seems to me like, well, I know I was there for Christmas and New Year's, because the friendliest people out there on Rockaway Beach. Have you heard of that?
Sounds familiar.
That was an area there, but somebody would come down and say, hey, come on up and have a drink, have some sandwiches. What's happening? Well, so-and-so is going into the service, got a farewell party. Well, you go up there and, hey, anything you wanted was there, Hey, Jewish people, they were having big parties. So I kind of liked it there, but we had to spend time at LaGuardia Field. We actually didn't land any planes, but it once again was monitor everything. Because our unit was as such, if they were coming back from a raid on Japan, there might be 25 or 30 planes in the air at one time wanting to get in. And our guy would have to stack them or keep them in a position away from each other so that they wouldn't wreck, then drop them off one at a time to land, or groups of 4, I should say. So they wanted to get those guys accustomed to planes being stacked. And what I mean is stacked, you'd keep them at different intervals. And that's, of course, is what they did at their, more so now. Of course, they got all those instruments now that, I forget what they call them now, that they didn't have then. You had to just rely, but you can see what altitude they are now. And then their turn would come, and vector them around into downwind, into base, and into final, and set them down. But it was all observation there. So they sent us back to Fort Dix. These were the days when old Frank Sinatra, he was on the hit parade. And that's what a lot of people are going to New York for, is the hit parade, Radio Music Hall. But he was on the radio every Saturday night. There at Fort Dix. But it was pretty tough winter, cold at Fort Dix. So they told us pack up all our gear, inspections, and make sure that we had it all, and that we're leaving. So we took a train into, of course, those were fast electric trains like you got now between Baltimore and New York, and that were going overseas. So we were to report to LaGuardia Field. Well, the rumors started at LaGuardia Field. We must be going to Europe. We didn't know where we were going to go, just that we were going to go overseas. So we get to LaGuardia Field, they put us on a plane. And it was what we call a military plane, a C-47. But that was a civilian plane. It was a DC-3. In other words, it was a 2-engine plane that held, I think it was 21 passengers, or 20 passengers plus a stewardess. And then we said, hey, we must not be going to fly over the ocean in this 2-engine plane. And our whole radar team was on that one plane with a radar officer. There was 16 of us, enlisted men and one radar officer. So 17 people on that plane was our radar team. And they took off and they headed west. And I forget what places they stopped at the time, but we flew into San Francisco International Airport. Your red light is flashing. And I know we got weathered in at Omaha, Nebraska, and we stayed at the Paxton Hotel, Omaha, Nebraska, overnight. The next morning we took off for International, San Francisco International. Landed there. They put us in military trucks, 6x we call them, 6x6. They had double duals in back and in front, a single tire, but they had 6 wheels pulling, and ran us over across the Golden Gate Bridge to Hamilton Field, California. And we got to Hamilton Field, California, and that night the guy said, you guys will be going out in, I think it was 2 days, going overseas. He said, you got a pass. All get passes. This was some captain giving us a little orientation of things. And I can remember to this day, he said, stay out of Golden Gate Park. Somebody said, why? See, Golden Gate Park was just to the south end of Golden Gate Bridge. He says, it's full of queers and they're protected. I mean, that was in 1945. You know what San Francisco is today. They were protecting the queers then, the police were. So I didn't stew into town at all. I stayed out at camp, out at Hamilton Field. You want to stop that or not?
Yeah,
Yes, Hamilton Field, California was a large airfield there, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's interesting when I look at nowadays and hear these race car drivers. So Jeff Gordon was raised in a town right in that in that vicinity. It's closed, as most all the air bases were where I was at. During my training, Truax Field is closed. Jefferson Barracks is just historically there. Chanute Field in Rantoul, Illinois is closed. Boca Raton is still an airfield, but not a military installation. So, also, when I came back, I came to Camp Stoneman. That's closed. That's a little further up the end of the bay from the Golden Gate Bridge. But I'll mention that later. I think it was 2 days we were at Hamilton Field, California. And they put us on a C-54, which is a 4-engine cargo plane. The civilian version of it is DC-4, which would hold probably maybe 70 to 90 passengers and crew. There'd be 2 rows of seats on each side of the aisle. But the cargo plane, the C-54, had 1 row of seats all around the outside, and they were what we used to call bucket seats, and they were made that way and called that because they were to haul the paratroopers. And they had, the paratroopers would sit on their parachute pack. Very uncomfortable, but that's the way they were to travel. Anyway, it was in the evening that we took off, just starting to get dark. And I remember the pilot, he circled over the Golden Gate Bridge and he let it be known to take a good look at it because you won't see it for a while. And the lights were on in the city of San Francisco. The lights were on and we headed west. You tried to find a comfortable place in the plane, but that was almost impossible, depending on how tired you were as to whether it was comfortable or not. But they had cargo thrown in the middle with cargo nets over to keep it from drifting around in the plane. But you'd be surprised how the guys could scrunch up onto the cargo, still be able to sleep a little bit. But I recall different times getting up and looking out the little windows of the plane, and you see the reflection of the moon on the water. There was nothing else to see down there except we were above the clouds too. Sometimes you wouldn't see anything because of the clouds. But as it started to get light, we came into Hickam Field, Hawaii. So we flew, it was 12 hours through the night. Now, of course, they make that in about 4 hours time now with a 747. But this was a long night of hearing those 4-engine motors drumming all the time, and I was glad to hear them, because if you didn't have them, you're going to get your feet wet. But we landed there in Hickam Field in good shape, and which was real close to the Honolulu International Airport, and also real close to Pearl Harbor. They put us in trucks again and took us across the island to a airfield. Mokulea was the name of it. There's a big park there, of course, and a beautiful beach. And it was directly diagonal across the island from Honolulu. We went through a mountain range to get there, which is nice traveling all the way. Pineapple fields and banana plantations all along the way. But then they set us up in tents at Mokulea. Lots of sand, so you never had trouble with your bedding or anything. If you didn't have a cot, you could sleep right on the sand. It was quite comfortable. And of course, the temperature is always great in Hawaii. I think the mean temperature is 84, meaning that the temperature that averages out to day and night. One thing that impressed me was the trade winds. Always, when there was a flag up, it was standing out straight. Of course, there's a 20-mile-an-hour wind blowing just about all the time. The base there at Mokulea had a little theater, and they put some pretty good shows on there. I don't mean film. I mean Boris Karloff was over there one time, the actor who played Frankenstein and the Frankenstein movies. But I remember him playing in a play there. Let's see, what was Old Lace.
Scarlet.
There's more to the name of that thing.
Scarlet and Old Lace?
Yeah, yeah. And he was quite a guy, quite an actor. But one of our recreational things was, back in those days, was to keep us supplied with bananas. I mean, they were easy to get at. And the plantations all around the place. The guy would check out a weapons carrier, which is you put, it's like a little truck, a Jeep with a truck. And 4 guys get back. If you had sit back there, if you had a top over it, why, you get more people in there. But if it's rainy, that's when we need that. But what they do is check that out. And we go down one road, and the guys would jump out with their bayonets and had to head out into that banana plantation. And then the guy would come back down the other side with the weapons carrier. And we'd meet him out there, and each guy that got out would have a stalk of bananas to take back and put in their tent, And the guy says, I wonder if that plantation owner gets pretty mad at us doing that all the time. And I know very well that plantation owner was watching us do it. And he was probably just chalking it up so he could send a bill into the army, so he'd get paid for his bananas that we got.
Yep.
We thought we were getting by with something, but I'm sure the army was paying for them anyway. But it was always nice to have hanging up in our tent a stalk of bananas, and let them, as they got ripe, grab another banana. The other food there that I appreciated was the Dole pineapple juice. they had their, the chest type Coke machines. They're not around anymore, but you used to put a dime in, or a nickel, what the Coke was, and get out a bottle of Coke. But these, you put your money in, you got out a can of Dole pineapple juice, and it was very refreshing, very nourishing. Now, we didn't have much to do there, except we were supposed to be waiting to go, as they said, down under. That's when you left Hawaii and you went down to where the fighting was, it was always down under. They got that name from, got used to calling that because first part of the war, the fighting was always south of the equator. And so when you went down under, you were crossing the equator and going down to Guadalcanal or Tarawa or New Caledonia or New Guinea or one of those places. But the fighting had already come way up north. Guam, Saipan, Tinian had all been taken. They were fighting in the Philippines at the time. And Iwo Jima hadn't happened yet, but it was about to. So we spent our time running into Honolulu and out at the beach. The only thing leery out there at the beach that I thought was once in a while someone would say there's barracuda in the area. They were a vicious fish. They talk about you throw a chicken in there, and they had the meat all off the bones before the feathers had hit the water. But we would see the large whales, I guess they were, off of the islands. I suppose they were on their way to spawn further north somewhere, but they would come right up out on their tails and fall off one way or the other. And they'd be groups of people come out there that Mokalea Park just to watch those a certain time of the year. And that was the time of the year that we were there. They had some old defenses all around the Hawaiian Islands, because I think they seriously considered that the Japanese were going to invade those islands. There's so many rumors going on after Pearl Harbor, but by the time we got there, it was a couple of years later. They didn't have the memorial erected yet in the bay there at Pearl to the Arizona, and they had some old rusted hulks laying out that had been damaged during that raid that they pulled, the Japanese had pulled. But I messed up over in Hawaii. I had a fever and went on sick call, and I ended up in the hospital. So I was in the hospital when my outfit got moved out to on the convoy. I forget how many days that they took blood out of my arm, and then they started taking it out of my finger. But I asked the nurse one time what I had, and she wouldn't tell me. So I crawled down to the end of my bed and looked at my chart one time, and it said mononucleosis. Of course, I'd never heard of it, and I couldn't pronounce it. And I told the nurse the next time I saw her, I said, how do you pronounce it, and what is it? She said, oh, that's just bad blood. And I said, well, how does it affect you? It says you get tired, weak, and you get blisters. So if you look through it on the microscope, you see blisters on your blood corpuscles, on your blood cells. And that's how we know that when you're well, when those blisters get off your blood cells, and we turn you loose. I said, well, how do you contact it? She says it's a common thing around college students. They call it the kissing disease. Get it off of cups and things like that. And I said, well, I wasn't in any college and haven't been around any gals, so I contacted it somewhere else. Anyway, my crew, my whole team had gone, and I was there alone on Hawaii. And then I'd catch sometimes the supply truck into town, into Honolulu, to a movie, or I got around quite a few different places there. I like to hitchhike across the island. I like to walk in those days anyway, and I didn't care whether I got a ride or not. In case of a shower, I had a little gas tent that I carried with me. It was all folded up and made of plastic, like isinglass, we called it in those days. And if it was meant to use in a gas attack, you flip it out and you squat under it. But it worked real good in case the shower come up. And the shower was always passing through those mountains. So I got along okay up there. I know that I was there when President Roosevelt died, because they had a big ceremony out to the field. I did quite a bit of guard duty out at Hickam Field. The sergeant of arms there would give us a good talking to, and don't you let anybody into those planes. What would happen, they'd load these B-24 bombers up to take down under. They had cigarettes and a lot of rations, and I think something to do with the black market. They'd come out in the morning and the plane would be gone, and they didn't know what was happening to them, so they had us guarding them. And I know one night there was a colonel came up there, approached the plane, and he wanted to get inside and I wouldn't let him. Of course, I had a submachine gun and a regular rifle, and I challenged him to back off, and he didn't go any further. But there's 3 guys in all. They turned around and went back, but the sergeant at arms was awful interested in when I told him what happened. But I figured that if I'd let him on there, why, that plane would probably been gone in the morning too. But the tower, you'd think that they'd have a little bit better control on that, but after a plane got started up and started taxiing, they'd be on their own, and the tower didn't have anything to say about it. So that was the interesting part down at Hickam Field. That place was all scarred up yet from that attack that they had on Pearl Harbor Day. Chunks taken off corners of the building, and see where the machine gun bullets from the airplanes had ripped into the concrete and messed things up pretty good. But there came a day that they said, get your gear together, you're on your way. Got a report to Pearl Harbor. So I went down there and they issued me a M1 carbine, combat boots, and a few other things that I hadn't had that were essential, and put me on board a ship. And the name of the ship was the USS Andromeda. It was an old victory ship. I guess one of those that Kaiser Fraser had made at the start of the war. But it had a 5-inch gun and a fantail. Then it had some twin 40 pom-poms, we call them, scattered around on the deck up in front. Then they had other racks that you could put 50 caliber on the rail if needed be. So it was very interesting. The next morning we started ship out. We were assigned, of course, a place down below where the bunks were, and they were five in height from the floor to the ceiling, and it was pretty crowded. Of course, they had the old bucket for the guys with the weak stomachs to kick back and forth when they got sick. But it didn't look like a very good place to me, and I noticed on the bulletin board that they wanted volunteers in the galley, cook's helper. So that sounded a whole lot better. It'd get me out of the hold anyway. And I volunteered for that. That was the best move I ever made in the service. You got to eat first. You got the best food. Got as much as you wanted, and all I had to do was peel potatoes. And they had a machine to do that. After a meal, we washed a lot of trays too, but it was a good experience, and I found out too that to keep your stomach full was the best way to handle that seasickness. When I first left the harbor, you get the ground swells in the ocean, and I mean they big old things. Well, I guess the guys like to ride on their surfboards, but they didn't help a ship much. They would roll and turn and toss, and that old SS Andromeda would roll up on one side, creak and groan, and come back down and roll on the other side, creak and groan. And I had a pipe at that time. During my loading and unloading and changing stuff, I'd broken the stem on it. It was a nice pipe, a Kirsten they call it. Had a white metal stem with a nice walnut bowl. You could take it apart and clean it up good. Well, anyhow, I had a broken pipe and a box of Bond Street tobacco, fine cut tobacco. And I seen these guys coming out on deck and throwing it up. An old joke was about that was, captain says to the sailor, "What's the matter, Sonny? You got a weak stomach?" He said, "No, sir, I don't think so. I'm throwing it as far as the other guys." But I thought, well, if I'm going to get sick, I think I'll get good and sick. So I got a big chaw of that fine cut Bond Street tobacco. I didn't have to chew it. It's more like snuff. You roll it around your mouth. I started standing there at the rail spitting. And if I had any animosity or fear or anything of getting seasick, it left me. Because I felt great from then on. I never did get seasick. I think it kind of settled my nerves, but being out on the ocean, all that water around there, and not knowing how to swim very well, and not liking to drink salt water. So that started our trip. We were solo at first, and we were to catch a convoy at Ulithi, which is over by Yap, which had been a Japanese submarine base at one time. The first island that we were to come to was Eniwetok. And I remember we were going along there a little ways north of Johnson Island. We're tacking with the ship. You go so along one direction, then you turn the other direction, supposedly to keep the enemy confused, not knowing where to lay a torpedo down in case they were wanting to blow you out of the water. So we were tacking down through there, and someone spotted a periscope off to port side. And practically everybody on the ship saw it. And evidently the captain had to see it too. We didn't know whether it was theirs or ours. I just know that that old boat got up to top speed, and we got into Anahuac, which was that first island, quite a few hours before we were supposed to. And we pulled into the bay there, and first thing they did is had a beer party. Came out alongside with the ship with a barge, and anybody that wanted to go to that party was got on that barge, and they brought so much, counted out of the guys, and how much beer for each one. By the way, I just happened to have some beer chips that I didn't use. I think it's too late to cash them in now. But it was kind of interesting. That island was so low that a hurricane would just blow right over it. Everything would be underwater. What a typhoon or hurricane, as we call them out there, would go by. Oh, here it is.
Is it reading?
These were some that I got later on because the date on them is wrong. The date says USS Andromeda, good for one ration of beer, on date stamped, and that's stamped May the 23rd. Well, I know I was in Okinawa, right close to that, so this is some that I got after I got over close to Okinawa. I wasn't much of a beer drinker anyway, and I usually gave most of it to the other guys that wanted it, but I remember that they had some little arbors like out there where they had the party. All GIs around. They sat there at the picnic table under those arbors and threw these empties at a big old 50-gallon drum. That would seem like the best sport that they had. Plastic was considerably different in those days. It was brittle. You could take and if you try to take a cap off a beer sometime, it might crack. It wasn't as bad as glass, but it'd get checked, a little moisture. So we were there at Anahuac. It was kind of interesting. And one of the guys did a little fishing. You can see the fish swimming down alongside of the ship. He got a little grappling hook and didn't use bait. You get that down underneath the fish and then pick up on it quick, and hopefully you get a few fish. I didn't see any. We didn't eat any, so we didn't get very many. They had a submarine net there that kept the submarines back out of the bay, so they were still active at that time in that area. And you started seeing evidence of the war a little bit. Like there was an old hulk pulled up on the beach and it had some pretty big holes in it. Then they were bringing a destroyer escort. No, I guess it was a destroyer back from one of the battles, and it was color like it's supposed to be gray, but a lot of smoke, black on it. And it looked like a hand had just come and wiped everything off the deck. It was flat there, like there had been nothing on the deck at all. So they were probably bringing it back to repair it or use it somewhere else, because later in the war they decided not to, to junk everything that was over there. It was more expensive to bring stuff back than it was to just get rid of it. But the next day we got out on the ocean again to Ulithi. that was a small island there, just south of Guam and the Marianas Islands chain. But as he pulled in, the convoy that we were supposed to accompany was pulling out of the harbor. So we just swung around and got in position with it. And what position they had assigned, the Navy had assigned us, and we were on our way. 18 ships in all. They had no battle wagons or anything. They had a little PT boat in back patrolling. They had tankers that would be completely out of sight once in a while when the weather got rough. Then they'd come back up and have water running off like a waterfall all over them. So it was interesting that the tankers were there to supply any of the ships that needed supplying, but I don't recall of any of them giving any fuel to any of our ships. Anyway, not to ours. But I continued to work in the galley and eat good and enjoy the trip as best I could. We had services on Sunday morning. I don't know who it was. The ship wasn't big enough to have a chaplain on, but I think it was the ship's captain would hold services out in front of the ship every Sunday morning. There was a few turnout, not a whole lot, but I guess they call it the forecastle, the area of the deck down below the bridge where they had that back a ways from that pom-pom gun that was on the nose. But somebody usually always had pretty good talk. I know that we spent our time chipping paint. See, the Navy is always in need of painters. The salt water causes that old metal to rust pretty fast, and this was an old ship in the first place. So they'd get off a big place, and all of her hammers were like ball peen hammers with a point on one side. That's what you chip the paint off with. Other guys would come along with some steel brushes and brush it down, and then they'd paint. So it always smelled like paint, fresh paint, around the place. I know as we got closer to Okinawa, things got a little different. One day, I happened to glance up, and here was this great big ship, a battle wagon. I mean, to look at it sent chills up and down your spine. Just awesome to look at. Huge guns poking out in every direction. And it was just as quiet as can be. Came up alongside of us and passed us up and made a big circle out there and came along again. Pretty soon, I think it was a B-26 bomber, twin-engine bomber, came down through there pulling a sleeve target. Had about a half a mile of cable out behind his airplane. And then that thing cut loose at it with a lot of guns. They were having target practice for that big battle wagon. So that was quite a sight. A little bit different, something different to see besides the flying fish. The flying fish I didn't realize this until I got back home, and I was telling my dad about some of the experiences. I said, no, I didn't have anything to do on the ship besides peel potatoes and wash some trays and sit on the deck and watch the flying fish. And he says, flying fish? I said, yeah. He said, you got to be kidding. I said, well, I don't know what else they'd call them. They come up out of the wave and they glide. They flip their fins out and they glide to the next wave that's high enough, and they go back in. He said, you know, my dad, or his dad, or my grandpa, they came over on a ship from the old country, from Germany, and as an immigrant. He says, my dad used to tell me of seeing the flying fish. He says, I thought he was kidding all the time. I said, no, believe me, the ocean's full of them. They're out there. But that's one morning, Sunday morning, we, off in the distance, you see smoke, and you can smell it. The cordite, something was going on. And they had services out in front of the ship. That morning, this guy that handled the services, he says, well, he said, boy, we got a good turnout this morning. And he looked around, he said, there must be twice as many here as it was last week. He pointed over there and he said, does that have anything to do with it? And the guy says, yeah. Well, the guy said, look, I don't blame you. He says, I'm scared too. I've been here before, but he says, remember this, that those Japanese, they're after the big ones. They want the aircraft carriers. They want the destroyers, escorts, and anything that would make a big explosion. He says, our ship here is loaded up with enough munitions that make a big boom, but said they want the big booms. So he said, but that's where it is, and we'll be there quick. And he had that, I think he talked on that one song, call upon me in the days of trouble, and I will deliver you, and you will honor me. That's what he talked on that day. And he says, that's trouble over there. And as we got closer, then you could see things happening. These big old battle wagons, hey, those shells are the size of a Volkswagen, or the weight of the Volkswagen. They'd arch those things over. They'd hit in the mountain, and you know. And it was spectacular at night because they would glow all the way. It's interesting to know that the Japanese, they had the biggest battle wagon ever built. They call it Yamato. They were so hard pressed at the end, they didn't have enough fuel for it to take it out and around to fight. They gave as much fuel as they had, and that was enough to get to Okinawa. And they were going to run it down there and beach it. And just sit there and use their big guns to try to blow us back off the island. Well, it so happens that our Navy planes found out that it was heading that way. And the Navy blew it out of the water before it got halfway there. I forget it, over 1,000 Japanese went down with the ship, you know. But they were desperate. They were suicidal, you know. Regardless of what these people talk about, we shouldn't have dropped a bomb. And this and that is full of baloney. That saved millions of people, not only our guys, but their guys. Because when we left that island, when the war was over, we had guys, every place where there was a place to put a tent, it was a spot, a jumping off place for the next invasion. They're getting the guys ready to invade Japan. And that would have been a mess up there. So we get up into the beach was Hagushi. I think that's the way you pronounce it. Where they had landed. Now, they went in there April 1st of 45. That was Easter Sunday. And there's no resistance, or very little. I think they put out 60,000 guys that first day. And then they started going south, and they started running into the Japanese. The Japanese figured they'd get them all landed, and then they'd encircle them and take them, get rid of them, see. But it didn't work that way. Well, we were out there, and it got interesting as we pulled up. There's ships all over. Oh, man. Anything and everything sitting out there. And the big carriers were off by open water because they had to keep moving when they were launching their planes and landing their planes, go into the wind, you know. So we got right up close to the beach. General quarters is what they say if there's to get to your position to fight. We started having general quarters one right after another. But they would announce it over the paging system on the ship. Bogies at 20 mile coming in from a certain altitude, come in from a certain direction. Bogies is what we call the enemy. See? And so one right after another. Of course, that went all over, and the Navy would get up there and start shooting them down, see, as much as they could. Very few planes. Well, I won't say very few because they did an awful lot of damage to our Navy there. I've got the particulars in there in the magazine about how many ships were sunk and whatnot, the VFW magazine. But the Navy did take a terrible beating. But we had to get into the beach. A tank lighter pulled up alongside of our ship, and a tank lighter is one of these Higgin boats with the front end drops like that, and the tank or whatever, truck or anything, you got in and runs out, runs up on the beach. Well, one came out alongside of the ship. The cargo thing dropped a net, cargo net down over the side of the ship, and we had to go down on that cargo net and get on that Higgins boat. Well, the boat was this way and the Higgins boat was up and down, and you just hoped you hit it right. You wouldn't break a leg or get squashed in between the two boats down there. But we had all our gear and come down that cargo net and got on. And the funny thing, it was low tide. We were on that tank lighter heading for the beach. We weren't in any danger or anything, but it was during an air raid. And he got hung up on a reef with it embarrassed him more than anything else with that Blue and Higgins boat. And he backed it up and gunned her around here and there. Finally wiggled himself off. I think something else went by and made a big wave, and he got it by enough he could get off. But the guys sitting back there, one guy would steer it. They were powerful things. So we got off, and they said to me, "Your bivouac area is the top of the hill." And I had all my junk to carry up there. I had my duffel bag thrown over one shoulder, and my other bag over another one, and a carbine over another shoulder, and my helmet on. I was walking along this just 2-track, and I heard beep, 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 beep. Somebody wanted by, and he had blown me off the 2-track. So I got down off the side of the road. And you know, all the orientation and whatnot we'd seen about wars and what had happened, I didn't get the drift of war until then. Because these guys were coming by, there was 2 6-by trucks. I mean, they're big trucks, 2.5-ton trucks. And they were loaded with our dead. They had arms sticking out. I mean, they'd just picked them up off the battlefield. Rigor mortis had set in, you know. Some of them didn't have arms, some of them didn't have legs. But what they do is they'd go out there with their stretchers and roll them off of the battlefield stretchers, hand them up on a truck and turn them over, and get another one up there and turn them over. Here are these 2 trucks, one right behind the other, arms sticking up there, legs sticking out through the slab. All different directions. And the reason they were moving along was because of the stench. I mean, the first thing that hit me was, where's the dignity of this? You pick up a dead somewhere, you ought to have a hearse, ambulance. They don't have time for that. These guys have been dead for a few days. They were stinking. Get them out of the way, get them buried. And this was the registration crews that were going out in the field after the battle and doing that. I don't know how long it's been, but it bothers me to the fact the timing is about right, as my friend Archie Paul Steele, that I chummed around with, a brother tomorrow. He was in the Marines, and it was just about that time he got killed. He got killed April the 25th, or May the 25th of 45. And that those beer chip says May the 23rd. So I'd got those beer chip coupons a few days before he got killed. But it may have been that they never got around to getting the bodies off the field. But the reality of war, that's when it first hit me. The fact, hey, you got to get hurt over there, you know. But then I walked on up, got up to the bivouac area, and it was a square set up there, not fenced off, but it had its limits. A guard on this corner, a guard on that corner, each four corners, and each guard covered back to here and back to there, you know. And anything that made a noise or moved out there, he shot at it at night. So I found a place to put my pup tent up, set it up. Then these trucks parked over there. They had bulldozers over there. They were making a cemetery just upwind from us. The bulldozers come down in, and the width of the blade, you know, push out. Then these crews would get up there and roll the bodies onto a stretcher, hand it down. They would cut the clothes off. Everything was, you know, junk then. Cut their shoes off the best they could. I mean, the body fluids and the old blood and saturated the clothes. Well, you'd be surprised when the bullets start flying too. They're having bowel movements, and their bladder goes empty in a hurry. I mean, the whole ball of wax. So they take their K-bar in there and under their belt, and these guys are swelling up by this time. Take all their clothes off, roll them up in a GI blanket, and lay them down equidistant in the bottom where that bulldozer had scraped out. And then they get that row filled up, they cover it over, and they bulldoze another one. But at the end of the day, they burned all those stretchers because they were so messed up. And we were downwind from where they were burning them. That's where some nut set up our bivouac area. Well, he'd set it up, and then he'd come along and put building a cemetery there is what happened. I'm sure if the cemetery had been started, he'd have gone somewhere else. Or they'd set up the bivouac area. But that's what we had every evening. The smell from flesh and blood and body fluids blowing up over there. We didn't have much trouble at night. I think they got some goats were shot. They had a lot of goats around in the area, the farmers, the people, the natives had. And we had something that tastes like goat meat a lot in the mess halls. It's a strange thing. You get up the northern end of the island, where all those goats used to be here. Oh, they're down the south end of the island. You down the south end of the island, where all those goats that used to be here. Oh, they're on the north end of the island. In the meantime, we're eating goat meat. But if that's the only thing, to be moving around at night, they'd be out there. And so they got a lot of goats shot, you know, something moved out there and shot. I remember the first encounter we had with a Marine. We're out walking along at night, two of us, and all of a sudden a Marine stepped out and had his gun on us, and he says, now I got a mental blank. We had a code word every night we're supposed to have them. And I think I found out later on, he would say one thing. He said, "Dark lady," and we were supposed to come back with something. What are you talking about? He said, "That's her password for the night." He says, "You don't know it, you should be shot." Nobody said anything about it. He could tell we're green as gourds, you know. That nobody said anything about it to us. We got back here, oh yeah, password for the night. It was Lena Horne. She was a black singer. See, he was to say dark lady, you'd say Lena Horne, and he'd go on through. Thanks, now they tell me. They had a sign up there, top of that hill, Yonton Airstrip. See, they took that thing at first. They wanted to get an airfield and bring our fighters in there so that they could take off from there and go down and bomb and strafe and come back and load up. And they did that. Just regular as cockney. Those guys wouldn't fly over 15 miles when they first got in there to raid, to strafe. And this sign says, "Welcome to Yonton," every night of 4th of July. And it was. So, you know, the Japanese would come over at night mostly to harass. I don't think they had any bomb sites or anything like that they could tell or even get close to what they're bombing at. Because my experience when the bombs came down, you'd hear a sound like they were falling end for end, and boom, you'd feel the ground vibrate. And that was the extent of it. But of course, if there was a ship out there and there was any lights on the ship, there better not be any lights on the ship at night. In fact, we couldn't even smoke at night, no lighting cigarettes or anything like that. Well, if you're in a tent, underneath the tent, it's all right. But yeah, during an air raid, the only thing that would get you if you were out in the open is if all that the ACAC or anti-aircraft guns were shooting up there and those shells explode and all that flak, this jagged piece of metal come back down. So if you're out, it's a good idea to have a helmet on or else be hidden underneath a flatbed truck or something so it wouldn't be hitting you because it would rattle down pretty good. In fact, our coverings, we dug holes there like where our unit was just for that purpose, for anti-aircraft at night. We put logs across and then sandbags. It wouldn't turn a bomb or anything like that, but it would turn a hunk of flak. So then came a day that I still wasn't to my group, to the guys that I was trained with. They said, "They're over on Ieshima. You gotta go over there." So I caught the mail plane. Every day the plane went back and forth to take the mail, and some passengers that needed to go there. It was interesting. That day, the pilot says, "You guys got cameras. Get them loaded up because we're going to take us a while to get there." How long? A couple hours. It was only a half hour away, 6 mile from Motabu airstrip. but it was probably a little further from Yantan where we were. He said, well, we're going to get some pictures of some of these islands that are untouched. So he went out straight west out in the China Sea. I forget the name, the Kuril Islands or something like that. But the natives were on there, the rice paddies, all up the side of the mountain. It'd be at different levels, you know, they'd wall it in, and it would be a different tone of color green. Nearer you got to the top, the lighter green. It would be, you start out with a good dark green. Down below, this pilot, he's kind of swooping down through there. The natives who down there digging clams out of the beach, their mouth would open up and look as you went by. You can see the expression on their face real easy, because they'd never seen a plane that close. They'd seen the Japanese, but they never raided those islands or anything like that. So they'd never felt the war as the war. So that was just about the extent of Okinawa. Then I got to Aishima. I remember getting off the plane. Some of these officers are awfully cocky, you know. Hey, I'm a second lieutenant. I'm an officer. You're a listed man. You better salute me. And this lieutenant was bawling a guy out for him not saluting him. He just stepped off a plane in a combat area. And this captain walked up to him, grabbed him by the shirt collar. He said, you see that hill over there? And that's that hill that I got showed there. He said, you put your hand up there to salute this guy back, you might be drawing fire on all of us. He said, there's probably guys sitting up there just waiting for someone like you to throw a salute back. So he stuck his tail between his legs and walked away and got back in his plane. But then I met the guys, and they had everything set up. The tents, we had 5 tents in a row, probably 100 yards from your flashing light, 100 yards from the runway. And then we went to a group tent for chow. The chow wasn't all that bad. But we had to settle in then. They had already settled in. I had to settle in for make a home away from home. Had a nice 2-holer out, exposed, nothing around it. I mean, you want to take a crap, you're out there in an open field, sitting on a wooden box. Funny. Oh, that wasn't long. They got some nurses in there. Then we had to enclose it and hang some canvas around it. Yeah. But the routine day there was 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And we had enough men for complete operations. And if you had to be a mechanic for a long time, you had that too. I forget, it seems to me like there was 4 mechanics in all, and the 4 mechanics were also operators to keep the thing going. This prime mover that pulled it around, of course they had it all set up there, was a 5.5 ton truck. It had 2 75 kVA generators on the back, and it had an air conditioning unit. Now the air conditioning unit was pretty nice. You consider that 830 some tubes plus 2 magnetrons. That's what you have in a microwave, is magnetrons to get that up frequencies. So it got, without air conditioning, it got pretty hot in there. And so it made it comfortable sitting too. I used to feel kind of sorry about those Marines over there sloshing it out in Okinawa, and we're sitting there in air conditioned comfort.